You want to know the sound a life makes when it breaks? It's not a scream. It's not a crash. It's the soft, final click of a deadbolt, thrown by a man who wouldn't meet your eyes. That was my world for 3 years. 3 years, carved out of my life, inside a 6x9 concrete room at the Coldwater Creek State Penitentiary. I was inmate number 78432. To the guards I was the ghost. To the other prisoners, I was nothing. A wisp of a man who kept his head down, his mouth shut, and his hands trembling. To the world outside, the one that forgot me, I was Michael Vale. The quiet accountant. The man convicted of embezzling $17 million and burning the evidence, along with his partner, in a warehouse fire. I was innocent. But that's what they all say, right? Here's what they didn't say, what the news never reported. I am afraid of fire. I have been since I was a boy. The sight of a matchstick makes my blood run cold. And I have a memory. Not a good memory. A perfect one. A ledger, a number, a face. It's etched behind my eyes forever. That was my curse. And, as I would learn, my only weapon. Think you could survive 3 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit? Comment innocent if you believe me right now. You might change your mind by the end. Prison is a machine designed to grind down your edges until you're a smooth, manageable stone. The king of that machine was a guard named Hackett. 300 pounds of smug cruelty. His favorite game was the echo. He'd slam his baton against the bars of my cell and lean in, his breath smelling of stale coffee and contempt. "Nothing to say, ghost?" he'd whisper. "No clever numbers to save you in here. Just the weak and the strong. And you're less than weak. You're silent." The change came on a Tuesday. Chipping paint off a cafeteria wall, I heard 2 new inmates talking. Low, urgent. They mentioned a name. Lionel Greer. My partner. The man who died in the fire. The man whose body was never actually found. "Greer's not buried," one muttered. "He's spending my money on a beach in Costa Rica. The whole thing was a torch job. Clean." My perfect memory replayed the trial. The blurred security footage. The forensics expert with shifty eyes. The one witness, a homeless man named Eli, who claimed he saw me pour the gasoline. He'd stared at his shoes the whole time he testified. A spark, deep in the frozen part of my soul, flickered. It wasn't hope. It was colder. Sharper. It was calculation. That night, when Hackett did his rounds, I didn't cower into my cot. I was standing at the bars. Waiting. "Problem, ghost?" he sneered. I looked up. I met his eyes for the first time. I said nothing. But my silence was different now. It wasn't empty. It was full. He must have seen something shift, because his sneer faltered for a half-second. He slammed the baton extra hard to compensate. The game had changed. I started to listen. Not just hear, but record. In the yard, in the showers, in the library. I memorized names, connections, schemes. I learned that Hackett was on the take, smuggling in contraband for an inmate named Russo, a white-collar guy in for securities fraud. I memorized the schedule, the guard rotations, the blind spots and the camera coverage. And I remembered everything about my case. Every line of the falsified ledger. Every pixel of the garbled security tape. I replayed Eli the witness's testimony word for word. The hesitation on the word kerosene. The way he'd said the man had a ring with a blue stone. I don't wear rings. Lionel Greer did. I needed to get a message out. My only link to the outside was my monthly visit from my sister, Anna. Visits were monitored, glass between us. Hackett always watched ours with a particular glee. The next visit I sat down. Anna looked tired, older. She pressed her hand to the glass. I did the same. And then, with my finger, I began to write. Tiny, invisible letters on the smudged plexiglass. I used a code we'd invented as kids. I wrote, Greer alive. Witness lied. Find Eli. Check morgue photo. Anna's eyes widened imperceptibly. She gave a tiny nod. Hackett, seeing only a silent, weak man touching glass, looked bored. 2 weeks later, the explosion came. Not a real one, a legal one. I was called to the warden's office. A different guard took me, not Hackett. The air felt charged. In the office, alongside the warden, was a woman in a sharp suit. She introduced herself as Mara Thorne, a federal investigator with the Justice Department's corruption unit. Mr. Vale, she said, her voice like cool steel. New evidence has come to light. The witness, Eli, has recanted his testimony. He was paid $20,000 to lie. The money was wired from an account in the Cayman Islands, an account traced to a shell company your partner, Lionel Greer, used. The world tilted. The warden looked furious. Hackett, who'd been lingering by the door, had gone pale. Mara Thorne leaned forward. But there's a problem, Michael. A big one. The day after he recanted, Eli was found dead in a flophouse. Overdose. The local police are calling it an accident. My blood turned to ice. Greer was cleaning house. Thorne's gaze was piercing. We believe you. But the recantation of a now-dead witness isn't enough. We need the source. We need to find Greer. And we think you can help us. We want to offer you a deal. My heart hammered against my ribs. A way out. A chance. Then Thorne dropped the final bomb. We've also opened an investigation into corruption within this prison. Guards taking bribes, evidence tampering. Her eyes flickered to Hackett for a split second. Your cooperation would be invaluable. And dangerous. The door closed behind Thorne. I was led back to my cell by Hackett. The walk was endless. The usual sounds of the block were hushed. When we reached my cell, he didn't open it immediately. He stepped close, too close. The hate coming off him was a solid heat. Federal suits, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. Think you're clever, Ghost? Think you're getting out? He shoved me inside and slammed the door, the click of the lock echoing like a gunshot. He leaned in, his face a mask of promised violence. You talk to them about anything in here, and you'll never see your daughter again. I'll make sure of it. You're not getting out. You're just going deeper. He walked away, his boots echoing into silence. I stood in the center of my concrete world. The walls, for 3 years my tomb, now felt like the jaws of a trap, about to snap shut. I had a path to freedom. And standing directly on that path, with a baton and a promise, was Hackett. The verdict on my life was being rewritten in a federal office. But the execution of that verdict, that would happen here, in the dark. And for the first time, the silence within me wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with a single, focused, crystalline thought. Game on. What would you do? Cooperate and risk your daughter, or stay silent and lose your only chance? Comment, talk, or silence below. The choice Michael makes next will change everything. Silence. For 3 years, it was my armor. Now, it was a cage of my own making. Hackett's threat echoed in the hollow of my chest, louder than any prison siren. You'll never see your daughter again. That night, the dark tasted different. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was the presence of a decision, coiled in the corner of my cell like a serpent. I could almost hear its hiss. Choose. My perfect memory, my curse, replayed my daughter's laugh. The exact pitch of it when she was 7, riding a carousel horse. I could see the chipped blue paint on its mane. That laugh didn't belong in this place. But the thought of it being silenced forever, that was a different kind of life sentence. At dawn, I made my choice. It wasn't bravery. It was a colder, more precise thing. It was accounting, weighing one terrible risk against another. And I realized the only way to protect Chloe was not to hide, but to become so dangerous, so exposed, that harming her would burn my enemies too. Mara Thorne returned. We met in a secure interrogation room, with Hackett posted right outside the glass. A calculated move by the warden. A message. Thorne slid a document across the steel table. This is a provisional release agreement. Your conviction stands, but based on your cooperation in locating Liano Greer and detailing the corruption here, you'll be transferred into federal protective custody. Eventually, a new trial. I looked at the paper. Freedom. A word that had lost all shape and color. Now it was just lines of Times New Roman font. Hackett, I said, my voice a dry rasp from disuse. The guard outside. He runs contraband for an inmate named Russo. Smuggled cell phones, drugs. The payments are laundered through Russo's sister's boutique, Silk and Oak. The routing number is 114009867. Thorne's pen froze. She hadn't even asked a question. The warden doesn't take cash, I continued, looking straight at the one-way glass. He takes favors. His brother got a no-show contracting job with the city last year. Approved by Councilman Driscoll, whose nephew is in here on a DUI manslaughter charge and mysteriously avoided gang violence. The room went utterly still. I could feel Hackett's fury radiating through the wall. How could you possibly know that? Thorne whispered. I remember, I said simply. I hear everything. I forget nothing. And I have a ledger in my mind of every dirty transaction whispered in this place for the last 18 months. What happened next was a quiet earthquake. Hackett was removed from duty, placed on administrative leave. The news rippled through the prison blocks like a shockwave. The ghost wasn't just talking. He was testifying. I was moved to an isolated cell, away from general population. For my protection. It was the most alone I had ever been. But in that silence, I built my case. I dictated names, dates, account numbers, drop locations to Mara Thorne. My mind was a vault, and I was finally handing over the combination. The emotional payoff wasn't joy. It was a profound, weary exhaustion. The weight of all that remembered darkness, finally shared. One evening Thorne brought a tablet. On a secured video line was my daughter, Chloe. She was 12. Her face had lost its baby roundness. Her eyes, my eyes, were older. Dad? She said, her voice a stranger's, yet familiar in its core. I had no words. The man who remembered millions of data points had nothing to say to his little girl. I just pressed my hand to the screen, and she pressed hers back. We sat there, in a silence that wasn't empty, but full of everything we'd lost. It was the first time I'd cried in 3 years. The tears were quiet, and they burned. The transfer day arrived. It was a textbook operation. Pre-dawn. Hushed movements. I was cuffed, placed in the back of an unmarked federal sedan with Mara Thorne. We pulled out of the prison gates. I didn't look back. I watched the gray road unwind under the headlights, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Free. Almost free. Thorne spoke to the driver. Take the state route. Avoid the highway. 20 minutes into the journey, on a desolate stretch of pine-lined road, the car began to sputter. The driver cursed, steering us onto a gravel pull-off. Engine's dead. A cold finger traced my spine. My perfect memory replayed the driver's hands. Competent. Calm. Not frantic. He'd pulled over too smoothly. Call it in, Thorne said, tension in her voice. The driver reached for the radio. It was just static. He turned, and in the green glow of the dashboard lights, I saw it. Not alarm on his face. Apology. Headlights pierced the rear window, blinding us. Two dark SUVs rolled to a stop, blocking us in front and back. I'm sorry, Mara, the driver said softly. They have my son. The doors of the SUVs opened. Men in tactical gear, but no insignia, moved with lethal purpose. And then, from the shadow between the vehicles, a man stepped into the beam of our headlights. He was older, leaner, with a sharp beard where there was none before. But I'd know him anywhere. I'd memorized every contour of his face from 1,000 company photos. Lionel Greer. Not dead. Very, very alive. He walked to my window, smiled a thin, expensive smile, and tapped the glass with a ring. A ring with a blue stone. Hello, Michael, he said, his voice muffled but clear. I hear you've been remembering things. Let's take a ride. We need to discuss your daughter's future. Greer's men pulled me from the car. Mara Thorne shouted, reaching for her sidearm, but a rifle barrel was pressed to her temple. The corrupt driver looked at his feet. Greer leaned close. The smell of his cologne, expensive, citrus and sandalwood, was a smell from my old life, now turned rancid. You thought you were so clever, with your quiet little mind, he whispered. But you only remembered the pieces I let you hear. Hackett? Russo? Pawns. I needed you to talk, Michael. I needed you to get out, to lead me to the one thing you hid from everyone, even the courts. The real ledger. The one with the Swiss account codes. You have it. Not on paper. In that perfect memory of yours. My blood froze. He wasn't here to kill me. He was here to extract me. To mine my mind like a data vault. He nodded to his men. They started dragging me toward the SUV. I fought a silent, desperate struggle. Over Greer's shoulder, I saw Mara Thorne, her eyes wide with fury and defeat. Then, a new sound. A distant, but growing sound. From above the tree line, a spotlight speared down, bathing us all in blinding white. A police helicopter. And behind us, on the road, sirens erupted, blue and red lights staining the pines. Greer's smile vanished. He looked at me, true shock in his eyes. You called them? How? I finally found my voice. It wasn't loud. But in the chaos, it was a blade. I didn't call them, Lionel, I said. I remembered something else. The serial number of Mara Thorne's Federal Issue pen. It was a biometric beacon. Activated by pressure. The moment I signed that release form, I sent a signal. You didn't spring a trap, Lionel. You walked into mine. Greer's face contorted in rage. He raised a hand, and in it, a small black pistol gleamed under the helicopter's light. It wasn't pointed at me. He swung it toward Mara Thorne. Then we do this the hard way, he yelled. The world compressed to that barrel, to Mara's terrified face, to the screaming whine of the helicopter. The verdict on my life was no longer in a courtroom. It was here, on this dark road, in the finger squeeze of the man I once called friend. And for the first time, I was not silent. I was not weak. I was a loaded weapon, waiting to go off. Greer's finger is on the trigger. Who lives? Who dies? Did Michael outsmart them all, or is he about to watch an ally die? Comment, shoot, or stand off with your prediction. The final hour begins now. In the fractured light of the helicopter's beam, with the scream of sirens painting the night, time didn't slow down. It became crystalline. Each fragment a razor-sharp detail. The citrus sandalwood stench of Greer's cologne. The tremor in his gun hand, not from fear, from rage. The exact distance between us, 8 feet, 2 inches. The model of the pistol, a compact Glock 26. And Mara Thorne's eyes, wide but not pleading. Calculating. She gave me a micro nod. A federal agent's nod. Don't freeze. Greer's men were scrambling, shouting, raising weapons toward the sky and the road. Chaos was his enemy. Chaos was my opening. My voice, when it came, cut through the noise. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement. A final entry in the ledger. The account in Liechtenstein, Lionel, I said, my eyes locked on his. The one you think I memorized. The one you faked your death for. Account number 4479-8812-366. Password, Carousel Horse Blue. Greer flinched as if struck. The password was the clue I'd left for myself years ago, buried in a memory of my daughter. He knew I had it. The money's already gone, I said. Wired out in 9 separate batches starting the moment I saw your face. The FBI has it. It's evidence. You have nothing. You're a ghost who just stepped into the light. It was a bluff. A magnificent, desperate bluff. I had the number, but I hadn't transferred a cent. But to a man like Greer, the idea was a psychic wound. His empire, his reason for being, vanishing before his eyes. His aim wavered, shifting from Mara to me. You're lying! Am I? I took a step forward. The cuffs were still on my wrists. I felt like a man walking into a storm. Check your phone. The alerts should have come through 12 minutes ago from your banker Klaus. His direct line is +423 555 1892. You're broke, Lionel. And you're loud. He screamed, a raw, animal sound, and swung the gun back toward Mara. But that half-second of doubt was all she needed. Mara dropped, spinning, her legs sweeping the knees of the guard beside her. At the same moment, a deafening crack split the air from the tree line. A sniper's round. It didn't hit Greer. It hit the Glock, tearing it from his hand in a spark of shattered metal. He stumbled back, clutching his bleeding hand. Then, the world erupted in movement. SWAT teams swarmed from the tree line. Greer's men were overwhelmed, subdued. Greer himself was slammed onto the gravel, a knee in his back. Mara got to her feet, breathing hard. She looked at me, then at the sniper's position, and gave a thumbs up. It was over. The next 72 hours were a blur of interviews, debriefings, medical checks, and silence, the good kind. My perfect memory was both the star witness and the prosecutorial goldmine. I recited the Swiss accounts, the Cayman wires, the dates, the amounts, the shell companies. I drew maps of the burned warehouse from memory, pointing out the structural inconsistencies that proved the fire started in the office Greer never entered that day. The warden was arrested. Hackett was charged with a list of crimes so long it read like a novel. The news channels, the same ones that had crucified the silent embezzler, now heralded the wrongly convicted hero with a photographic memory. But the noise meant nothing. The only sound that mattered was the soft snick of metal. The day they took the ankle monitor off. I was in a small, sun-drenched apartment the feds had secured. The door opened. And there she was. Chloe. She stood in the doorway, a young woman on the cusp of being a teenager, holding a single, slightly deflated, blue balloon. Anna was behind her, tears streaming silently. No words. What words could hold 3 years of absence? I knelt. She walked forward, her steps hesitant then sure. She didn't throw her arms around me. She pressed her forehead against mine, just like we used to do when she was small. We stayed like that, breathing the same air, our silence a cathedral. "I knew you didn't do it," she whispered. "I always knew." That was the verdict that mattered. The only one. But freedom isn't a clean slate. It's a landscape scarred by the storm. A few weeks later, I was testifying before a grand jury. As I recited yet another string of numbers, I saw him. In the public gallery. Not Greer, he was locked in a supermax. It was Eli, the homeless witness who had recanted. He was clean-shaven, wearing a cheap suit, staring at me with hollow, grateful eyes. He'd been in witness protection. Seeing him was a reminder. We were all broken pieces of Greer's game. After the session, Mara Thorne found me outside. "We got it all, Michael. It's done. Your record is being expunged as we speak." "Thank you, Mara." She hesitated. "There's something else. When we swept Greer's safe houses, we found files. On you. Dating back years. He didn't just set you up because you were his partner. He targeted you specifically because of your memory. He saw it as the perfect, unhackable backup drive. He never meant for you to die in the fire. The plan was always to discredit you, let you rot in prison, and then, later, extract the information he needed. You were never the fall guy, Michael. You were the vault." The air left my lungs. The 3 years of despair, the loneliness, the label of weakness, it was all a long, cruel prelude to a heist he never got to finish. My silence wasn't a symptom of my guilt. It was the asset he coveted. I moved to a small town by the ocean with Chloe. The quiet soothed us. I got a job quietly consulting for financial security firms, using my memory to find the fractures in systems. I was healing. One evening, I walked on the beach. The sunset was afire across the water, but it didn't frighten me anymore. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Hello?" A voice, electronically distorted but familiar in its cadence, spoke. It was the voice of the man who had driven the car the night Greer was caught. The federal agent whose son was threatened. "They told you it was over, Mr. Vale," the voice said, calm, remorseful, terrifying. "It's not. Greer didn't work alone. He worked for a consortium. A group of very quiet, very powerful men who believe information is the only currency. They know what you can do. They've been watching you rebuild." I stopped walking, the cold Pacific surf washing over my feet. "What do you want?" "We don't want anything from you," the voice said. "We have a proposition for you. A job. The kind of job where a perfect memory and a face the world has forgotten are invaluable assets. Think of the good you could do. Or," the voice paused, "think of the danger that could find a man living quietly with his daughter on a poorly patrolled coastal road." The line went dead. I stood there as the sky darkened from orange to deep blue. The vast, remembering ocean in front of me. Behind me, up the path, the warm lights of the cottage where my daughter did her homework. I was out of prison. But the world, it seemed, was full of cages. And some men saw a man who remembered everything not as a victim, or a hero, but as a tool. A weapon. They called me silent and weak. They never heard the verdict. But now, a new trial was beginning. And this time, I wouldn't just be the witness. I would be the judge. And the executioner. Sometimes the past won't let you go. Sometimes it needs you to remember one more thing. What would you do if your greatest curse became the world's most dangerous weapon? Comment remember if you think Michael should take the job, or run if he should disappear with his daughter. The choice is his. But is it ever really a choice?